Hi everyone, and welcome to our third quarterly Workplace Wellbeing Spectrum update for 2026. My name is Nicole, and I'm Head of Marketing, Brand and Communications here at Altius. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands on which we gather today. For me, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us. Just over to the agenda slide. Today's agenda will start with a brief introduction to Altius and explore why organisations should aim higher when it comes to workplace wellbeing. We'll introduce the workplace wellbeing spectrum, sharing the latest insights and business case for workplace wellbeing. And a large part of today's session will be our panel discussion, who will explore how healthy leaders shape team wellbeing, performance, and culture. Please add your questions to the Q&A. We've allowed time towards the end to answer these. You'll also see QR codes throughout the presentation. Scan the code at any time to book a discovery call with one of our team to explore how the workplace wellbeing spectrum could apply in your organisation. Workplace health is clearly important to everybody joining the call today, but too often people are working in systems where wellbeing is treated as a box to tick, rather than something that shapes how we work, recover, and perform. Wellbeing is personal, it's certainly not linear. People may be recovering from injury, managing pressure, rebuilding confidence, supporting others, or simply trying to stay balanced. That is why we're opening up the conversation through these quarterly webinars to give organisations the opportunity to better understand the real experiences of their people and build wellbeing systems that support them in practical and meaningful ways. So, who are we? At Altius, we support health and wellbeing across the full workplace wellbeing spectrum, from prevention and early support through to recovery, safety, and performance. You might know us through one part of our business, but our services are certainly designed to work together to support a whole person and a whole organisation. They include both physical and psychological, because in real life they are rarely separate. Through PeopleSense, executive health solutions, rehab services, and workplace health and safety, we can help you build safer, healthier, and stronger performing teams. As I mentioned earlier, we're all about aiming higher for the health and well-being of your people. That's why we've launched the 100 Reasons movement, a movement that makes the case for change. It gives a voice to HR leaders who want their organisations to do more and be better, not because they have to, but because it drives performance, creates healthier and stronger people and organisations. One reason is easy to dismiss, 10 reasons can be ignored, but 100 reasons and the knowledge that there are 1,000 more make the case undeniable. So here's a few reasons that others have told us about their why. Ultimately, these reasons come back to just one thing. When we put people and their well-being at the centre, we create healthier workplaces and stronger performance. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Sharon, our facilitator for today. Welcome, Sharon. Sharon is our head of customer at Altius Group. She holds a Bachelor in Science and Physiotherapy and Masters in Mental Health. And with over 25 years experience in personal injury and workplace wellbeing, she is definitely a sought after expert in this space. So thank you, Sharon, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here again for one of our webinars, and I'm really genuinely excited about the content that we have for today. I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Altius Workplace Wellbeing Spectrum. This is a framework to really help you better understand your people and where they may sit across health, across wellbeing and performance, as well as really understand the supports that they need. At peak, people are flourishing, they're performing well, they have the right support to stay well and to keep performing. At risk is where we often see early signs of strain. People might be showing up, they might be still showing up and doing their role, doing their work, but the pressure is starting to build and the risk is starting to increase, the risk of potentially harm or injury or incident. And this is where early intervention services are really impactful in terms of addressing both risk and then preventing harm to your people. In acute, this is where someone needs more and more immediate support. There potentially has been either a physical or psychological incident or event that has led to people needing time away from work. And then finally, within chronic, people are experiencing more complex or longer term workplace health or non-workplace health related conditions. And this is where more coordinated support is really needed to support them return to optimal health and return to work as well. So the purpose of this spectrum is really simple. It helps you and your organisation move away from a one-size-fits-all approach with wellbeing and really helps you think about how you can support your people across prevention, early intervention, recovery, and performance. As we do each quarter, we like to look at the data in relation to our topic. And today, as you would all know, we're delving into the leadership effect. And so I'm just going to run through just a couple of really interesting statistics around this topic. So firstly, the research from Deloitte shows, I think, some really compelling data that nearly 70% of executives are seriously considering quitting their role for an organisation that better supports wellbeing. And the research from Gallup this year showed that manager engagement globally has fallen from 27 to 22%, which is pretty significant in the previous year. So that really is showing quite a downward trend. If we look at the stats related to risk, we're seeing that half of Australian workers experience burnout in the past year from the research from Beyond Blue. But I also think very interestingly that around 1 in 3 of those people didn't feel comfortable that they could tell their manager about their experience. So I think that provides some interesting insights for leaders. And only 30% of leaders feel that they have enough time to actually do their job properly. Moving on to acute, we know that the cost of workplace burnout is incredibly high. The current data coming out of the Melbourne Business School is that it's around $14 billion annually to the cost within Australia and economy. We also know that the cost of mental health claims is significantly higher than physical injuries. We see that mental health claims are now making up about 12% of the total claims that we're seeing at the workplace. And then finally, within our chronic phase, again, the data really speaks to the importance of services, prevention programs to really address psychological illness and psychological injury in the workplace. So within the serious workers' comp claims for mental health, again, they're continuing to rise when we compare year on year. And again, we know that the costs of those are significantly higher than other serious claims. So I think, again, always just interesting and helpful to sort of look at the data around the context of these topics that we're really wanting to explore. So now this leads me to onto this really interesting topic that we want to explore today around the leadership effect and specifically around how leaders can shape team wellbeing and performance. So what I'd like to do, you can see some other friendly faces on the screen, is introduce to you our panel. It gives me great privilege and pleasure to introduce some of my colleagues. So firstly, John Hall. John is the CEO of Executive Health Solutions by Altius. It's one of Australia's leading providers of executive health services. John has tertiary qualifications in nursing, exercise science, and public health, and he brings a very strong preventative health focus to helping leaders understand their health risks. Under John's leadership, Executive Health Solution delivers more than 10,000 evidence-based health assessments each year. And this is supported by experienced doctors and a team of allied health professionals across Australia. John is genuinely very passionate about supporting executives, leaders, organisations around health, and very much the executive health assessment approach is a hands-on medicine approach to support executive health, support wellbeing, productivity, and the long-term performance of leaders. Our next panelist, by way of introduction, is Jessie Brugler. Jessie is an experienced psychologist and senior leader at People Sense by Altius, who brings a really distinctive combination of both clinical expertise, leadership experience, and organisational insights into the psychology of leadership effectiveness. Jessie has over 10 years' experience as a psychologist and has developed during this time a really deep understanding of the cognitive, emotional, and behavioural factors that shape leadership performance. And his work spans across both one-on-one personal interventions as well as organisational leadership. And then our third panelist is Chloe Devine. Chloe is a registered psychologist and organisational consultant at Workplace Health and Safety by Altius, our other business stream. And her work very much focuses on optimising and change consulting, health research, corporate wellbeing, and psychometric testing. Chloe's also an expert in leadership coaching and development and really supports leaders to build effective teams, behaviours, and create those conditions for individuals and teams to perform at their best. So you can see that we've got a really great wealth of experience on the panel today, and we're here to really explore the topic of the leadership effect, and in particular, how do leaders shape team wellbeing and performance. So, John, I'm going to start with yourself, and we're going to kick off this panel discussion by really spending the first part of this and some time on the importance of leaders' own health. So I'm going to start with you, John. You work with leaders, a lot of them, helping them to understand their health risks. What are you seeing in the data and the results of the executive health assessments that we're doing?
Thanks, Sharon. Look, great to be here. I think it's a really important topic. So we see a really broad spread across the whole bell curve of health. So we have, some people down that end that are just really healthy, very conscious of their numbers, very motivated to look after their own health and see the benefits of that for themselves and the wider group. And then we have the other end, which is where we see people that are really struggling with their own health, whether that be physical or psychological. Sometimes they're unaware of it, or they're not recognising it. And sometimes we need to get them into quite urgent care, whether that be psychological or physical. But in the middle of the bell curve is where the rest of us sit, for want of a better word, that average executive. And so they're performing well. They tend to, on average, carry 3 to 4 risks, health risks, and often at a level that is undetected or not visibly noticeable to them. So they may carry cholesterol, blood glucose, blood pressure, some of those factors. They may be carrying some weight. They may be not meeting the guidelines around exercise, diet, and they may be drinking too much. And so often for those people, it's that they're performing, but are they performing at their best? And it's sometimes intervening with some support that can help those people address those particular physical risks. The other aspect where obviously that's vitally important is around psychological wellbeing. So we see around 6 to 7% of executives or leaders that come through are in that suboptimal psychological wellbeing state, and measured across depression, anxiety, and stress. And about 50% of those are actively under care of someone or actively aware of it, whether that's through an EAP provider, through their GP, or through their own psychologist. But the other 50% aren't. And so they're the ones that our role is really to try and engage with them and see if there's some support that we can provide to them through that care. And that can be, again, through their choice, back to an EAP, through their GP, or through our partner company, People Sense. We have really senior registered psychologists that at times I've got on the phone and had someone seen the next day. The other area that's really interesting is sleep. I mean, I think in the importance of sleep has just been recognised more and more over the last 10 years, and it's not necessarily the badge of honour that it used to be, that you only sleep 4 hours. But we know that all of us know that if we're getting good sleep, we're making better health choices, we're more resilient, and we're a better leader. And so sometimes we're seeing about 10% of people that we see through have some sleep disorder, whether that's sleep apnea or just ruminating at night or issues with sleep. But interestingly, about 48% of people that come through say that their quality of sleep is really poor. And there's usually a range of reasons for that. And some of those are simple to address, screen time, trying to do relaxation, trying to clear the mind, those sorts of things. And then some of them may be clinical in nature or weight related. So whilst the average executive is performing well, they do carry a number of risk factors. And if we look at it over a period of time, if they're not addressed, then that can become more and more of a problem. And so that's what we try to do, is help them address those risks.
Well, thank you. That's so interesting. And I think a lot of people have that experience of they don't know what they don't know in terms of how well they can feel. They put up with a suboptimal
Right.
level of well-being within themselves.
Yeah, I think it becomes normal.
Yes.
And normal is influenced by obviously yourself and your environment. And sometimes recalibrating what is normal is really important. There's a wealth of data that shows that healthier people are, better at home, better at work, all those sorts of things. Sometimes people just need to be a bit of assistance to get there.
To have that experience. Thank you. Jessie, I'm really keen to hear your experience here. I mean, what I currently see in my role with working as head of customer, we see organisations that one of the biggest challenges that for leaders is coping with the pressure of their role. How do you see, what's your experience around how do leaders recognise when pressure is starting to affect their health and performance? What are the signs to look for, and why is it important to sort of, pay attention to those?
Thanks, Sharon, and I echo John's sentiments. It's great to be here, and I think this is an incredibly important forum and discussion. So when we're looking at leadership, and every leader is not immune to pressure and to that stress. So we all experience that pressure and stress, but effective leaders and strong leaders recognize when that's affecting them and what they can do about it and have strategies to put in place as well. So I'm going to be talking mostly about chronic stress here that can be experienced from sustained pressure. And it's something, as John said, that because it happens over time and because we can get into a pattern of that, it can be something that we're not noticing necessarily on a day-to-day basis. And it is, though, having an impact, and it can have a big impact on our health. So both our physical and our mental health. And John alluded to some of the information there, and you as well to some of the stats, Sharon. But it can also have a big impact on our capacity to lead. So the judgments that we're making, the decisions we're making, the way we're weighing up information, and ultimately the direction that we're taking our team in. So it can be incredibly important for us to be aware of how that stress is impacting us, or how that pressure is impacting us over time, and have some strategies in place to be able to manage that. When it comes to being aware, I think it's incredibly important for us to know what our warning signs are, what our canary in the coal mine is, if you will. And while there's some very common ones that we can see, things like sleep disturbance, which John referenced already, just increased irritability, more tension and stress, especially when we're going into work or in certain situations. It can be very personal. So for us to recognize, what are my behavioral markers? What are my sort of ways of thinking and patterns that I get into when I'm under that sustained pressure? And what are the emotions that come up for me as well? And if we can take some time to reflect on that, whether it's individually, whether it's with our organization, whether it's with a psychologist in an EAP or a manager assist session, it can really help us to understand those markers for ourselves, and just like the canary in the coal mine, to be as sensitive as we can to notice them, so we can put effective strategies in place. Because without noticing them, it's very difficult for us to then know, well, what's my next step to be able to actually put those strategies in place. So when it comes to those strategies, again, it is very personalized. So there's the universal setting boundaries for ourselves, making sure that we are getting that adequate downtime, getting that effective turn off time, effective sleep, putting different boundaries and strategies in place to be able to manage it on the day-to-day. But again, it's very personalized. So another thing for us to take and look at ahead of time, if we're in that pattern, fine. But if we're not, also have a look at, well, what are some of the ways that I, as a leader in my role, or if I'm moving into a higher role or a role with more responsibility or pressure, that I'm actually going to put in place to be able to manage that. And I think the final takeaway from this part is it's a skill. It's something that we learn and develop over time. We can sometimes think, oh, we see a leader, especially in those higher roles, CEO level and higher. Oh, they're someone that just naturally is able to absorb that pressure and manage and deal with it. And I'm not. But actually, it's something that we develop and build over time. And if we see that as a skill that we can increase, it can be something we can actually focus and spend some time working on, rather than something that we think we're either going to come naturally or not come for us at all.
I love that. Yeah, it's not something you're good or bad at. You learn just like you develop other skills along your career pathway as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Chloe, just picking up on that point that Jesse talked about around leadership capacity and that sort of ripple effect that it can have. From an organisational perspective, how do you see that connection between a leader's own health and the wellbeing and culture that they could create within a team?
Thanks so much, Sharon. And again, just to echo, really excited to be here today. I imagine a lot of people are joining today's session because they care about, not only their own well-being as a leader, but also the well-being of their teams. And what we know is there definitely is a strong link between a leader's well-being and capacity and the impact that they can then have on their team and their team's culture. To kind of dig into this a little bit more, it can be easy to think of a team culture as something almost a bit static. It's kind of what we say we're here to do. It might be certain values that we ascribe to the purpose of our team. And there's sort of things that we say, we put documents around it, and that's it. But what we understand from the psychological organizational theory is that team culture is built on a number of different levels. And while those kind of artifacts and values are absolutely important levels in that equation, the kind of live version of our team culture is really what lives within what's called our underlying assumptions about each other. So these are the behaviors that we come to expect as normal from each other and from our leaders. And this is very much, I think, what comes to define almost what we say is our true culture. Sometimes all of the different layers align, but often when we have this kind of underlying assumption layer of our culture not aligning with our artifacts and what we say we do, it almost becomes the actual culture, what we actually do here. Now, what we know about those underlying assumptions is that leaders have quite a particular influence over these. They often are one of the people to set the pace or the standard for behavior within a given team. And that's not only through what they're saying to their team, but really importantly, what they are doing. Quite often, a team will do what a leader does rather than what they say, especially if they're a team leader that a team admires and wants to work toward being like. So what we heard from Jesse was rightfully that one's well-being can really influence their capacity to act. And this absolutely can then come through in the behavior that a leader might engage in their work. To try and kind of put this into a bit of an example, let's think of, say, a leader who wants to drive a high-performing culture within their team. What they might do in terms of their behavior to try and progress this and push this forward is look for those opportunities to empower their staff with things like stretch goals or other, big complex projects, and really invest the time to coach them through that and help them navigate that uncharted territory. This is something that understandably it takes time and it takes effort. Now, let's say a leader maybe doesn't feel like they're in a place in their personal well-being or capacity to invest this. What they might find themselves doing is actually withholding some of those more complex projects or tasks from the team just for the sake of wanting to work through them as quickly or as simply as possible by doing it themselves. Now, this action alone or inaction doesn't necessarily come across as intentionally doing this, but can send a message to the team that it's actually a team where we focus on our own remits and we focus on speed of work, but we're not necessarily a team that values continuous growth as part of our culture. So that might be a space where the actual assumptions no longer align with what we actually say our culture is. So I would say the kind of main takeaway of that is that if a leader wants to help their team grow a great team culture, it takes work and it takes investment. And I think a leader really does need to feel healthy in themselves to have the capacity to proactively role model the desired behaviors that they want to see in others.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, it's really lots of thought-provoking ideas there. John, just picking up on that point that Chloe's, talking about in terms of leaders wanting to, optimize their own health. Like, could you share some examples of what maybe you've seen, execs put in place in terms of like a strategy to prioritize their health, like something really practical?
Yeah, I mean, I think at times I've been sort of in awe of how some execs in very busy jobs still manage to juggle everything and put in place initiatives for their own health. And the thing that always strikes me is that they do it because they intrinsically know the value of it. So it's not only the value for themselves, they recognize that obviously being healthy, we all want to be healthy, but they realize the value that if they're looking after their own health, then they're a better leader, they're better at home, they're more resilient, they sleep better, and they make better health choices. And so often the leaders that I've worked with over the years, it's that clear connection between health and performance that is the thing that really drives them. And I'll give you an example. A long time ago, when I was an exercise physiologist, I worked with a CEO of an ASX listed company. And when we did his VO2 max and his testing, he was remarkable for his results. And I sat down with him after it, and I've never forgotten this. I sat down with him after it, and I said, "How do you do this? How do you manage to have such a big job, such time demands, but still look after yourself physically and psychologically?" And he actually showed me his diary, and in his diary, spread out through the week and the month, he had AWTP various times throughout the diary. And I asked him what that was, and it was appointment with the pavement. And so that was time that he put in there to go for a run, go to the gym, to do what he had to do to look after his own health. And interestingly, back then, 20 years ago, he put AWTP because if he put run or gym, someone would book over it because they would say that's not an important appointment. Now, I don't know if that's changed. I'd like to think that it has, that leaders can now allocate time in their diary for themselves. But he was saying if he puts 5 in, he might get 3. But if he doesn't put any in, he won't get any. And so I think the thing that I find with leaders that manage their health well is that applying of those business skills they have to their own life, that planning and that strategy and that problem solving. That same CEO used to get his assistant to call hotels before he traveled to clear out the minibar because he recognized that when he came home late, he'd grab a chocolate bar and whatever alcohol drink was there. So he was aware of his weak spots and put in strategies of how he could address those weak spots. And it's always stuck with me over 20 years. And I actually do it myself. I have in my diary time that's allocated for me to jump on the trainer or go for a run. I don't always get it. But if it's not there, I won't get it. And even in a health company like ours, you need to allocate that time for yourself. And so I think the people that tend to manage it well really have those skills and those strategies to do it. We've had, some of our health coaches go to restaurants where executives entertain regularly and work with the chef on what is the healthiest choice. So when they go, they don't have to think. They can just know this, and this are the healthier things that I need to eat. So it's a lot of strategies to deal with, the constant demands and pressures. And I think when we make health accessible, that's when it's easy to do. If good health choices are hard, then it's much more difficult. And so I think individuals that prioritize their health find ways to put that into the diary. And we don't always get it. And there's going to be times where you don't get it. But if you don't have it in the diary or you don't plan for it, it's not going to happen. Even if you travel, taking gym gear at least gives you the option. You may not get to it, but at least you've got the option. So I think it's really simple strategies from an individual point of view that can make a big difference.
And it's that, I think, equal prioritization around something that would be, in a way, non-negotiable work-wise, that's non-negotiable with your health, but that flows on to then having the business and the work.
And there's 40 years of research around the benefits of healthy leaders. And if we believe the research, which is peer-reviewed, published research, then prioritizing that should be a good business decision, not just a personal decision.
Yeah, I love that. All right, we're going to now pivot slightly. So just taking this topic a little bit further to now really look at the impact of strong leadership on individuals. So Jessie, I'm going to throw to you in the first instance. What impact do you see that strong leaders have on the individuals within a team and their experience of work?
It's a great question, Sharon, and I think it's a really, really important one, and it's incredibly important for every leader to focus on that individual experience that they have with each individual within their team. If you think back to previous roles that you might have been in, everyone listening and attending this, for a lot of us, with the details, the strategies, the day-to-day doesn't necessarily come to mind, but most of us can remember how a leader made us feel. And for me, whether that's jobs that I've done recently or work in retail or flipping burgers when I was young, I still remember those leaders and how they made me feel and influenced the way that I felt when I came into work, how engaged I felt, how motivated I felt, and ultimately how safe I felt within the team. So and it can be something that we can often not focus on as heavily when we're in our leadership role as we do of other things. So if you think when you're meeting someone for the first time, whether it's a new person coming into your team or you're a new leader going into a new team, we often, when we're building that first relationship, if you're anything like me, you can focus on, okay, what's the strategy that they need to know? How do they get up to speed on what they need to know to do their job or to know how the organization works? But actually taking that time to really say, how do I build a relationship with this person? How do I focus on this individual and making them feel like they're supported, making them feel like they know my boundaries, who I am and how I'm going to lead, and that they feel like that they've got that safety within the organization, which we're going to talk a little bit about later on as well. So in order to do that, focusing on that part is really important, but also knowing yourself. So being really aware as a leader for you, what are your strengths? What are the things that really come naturally, that are easy for you in order to build that relationship and just as importantly as build it, to maintain it over time as well? But also, what are your limitations? What are the things that you find challenging as a leader in that interpersonal space? And what are some of the things that are difficult for you to actually engage in to be able to make someone feel comfortable, to be able to make someone feel like they're motivated and want to be part of that team? So taking some time out to reflect on that, I think, is incredibly important. And that might be something you do on your own. It might be something you do with your leader or with others in your organization, or you actually do something with an organizational psychologist or a psychologist to really take that time to understand your approach and how you can build that effective relationship. And I think the third thing that's really important here is that no one size fits all. So when we're building a relationship with people, we obviously have our style and our scope within us as a leader and within the way that we build those interpersonal relationships, but also being aware that I need to change that and be able to pivot on that to make sure that I'm building a relationship in the way that's going to be the most effective for each individual, obviously sitting within your standards as a leader as well. And not only is that from person to person, it can also change from time to time with the same person as well. We can often put a bit of a set and forget. Yep, I've built this relationship with this person. It's good. It's solid. Let's move on. But actually maintaining that relationship is incredibly important, and being aware that that relationship's also going to change over time, that the pressures on that person and the way that person engages in work or other things from their personal life might change as well. And if we as leaders are able to adapt to that, to be able to recognize each person as an individual and adapt to their needs, obviously within the context of us as leaders, it can really build that strong team and build that strong engagement with each individual within that team as well.
Thank you. Chloe, just sort of building on what Jessie's spoken about there, if we take now that organisational perspective, what role do you see that leaders play in creating, the right conditions to allow individuals to perform at their best?
Thanks so much, Sharon. I think, look, the short answer is I think there is an enormous amount of influence that leaders can have over the foundations for staff to thrive. Specifically, I think how a leader acts in those one-on-one interactions with staff can be so important for building the right foundations for staff to perform at their best. And what the research suggests in this area is that staff perform best when they've got the clarity, trust, and safety net from their leaders to help them feel able to learn, take ownership over their work, and really stay motivated in what they do. I think some of the things that Jesse's mentioned there around that self-awareness as well as that relationship management skill, these are really crucial to equip leaders to then be able to identify and adapt to the needs of their staff within those interactions to make the most of them. In terms of what leaders might actually do to bring this to life, I mean, there's quite a lot of ways that they can go about it, but some of the evidence-based ways we know tend to land well with staff and help to motivate. I think first and foremost, Jesse spoke about being kind of aware of our own strengths and motivations. I think equally in what a leader can do outwards is also focus on their people's strengths and motivations. So I know we do have to focus on development for maybe areas where skills not quite there yet, but equally so, we also want to be asking staff, what motivates you? What do you love coming to work to do? Or what does a great day at work look like for you? To be able to understand those areas where staff might actually be really driven to engage in certain elements of work. I think another thing that leaders can do is really actively encourage engagement with new ideas, new perspectives, and new ways of working. So what they might do is ask staff members, well, how else could we approach this? Or is there a learning here that we can take forward? And I think what those sort of questions do is create a really great precedent to staff that this relationship is safe for learning, for trying new things, and for continuously improving. And I think what a couple of these different strategies help to blend into is what we would call a situational approach to leadership, where we're looking to meet a staff member and the support we give them in alignment with their own professional journey and where they're at there. So earlier staff members in their career or in a role are likely to benefit best from, say, more directive or instructional support because they're still learning the ropes and what it means to be in this role. But naturally, as they develop and as their competence and confidence increases, a leader who's looking to get the best from their people is organically going to adapt their style and support to meet them where they are. And that might look like a change from more directive leadership to more mentoring and coaching. So I think the key there in building that trust and safety for staff really requires leaders to step out of their own perspectives and assumptions and focus instead on understanding the human in front of them.
Okay, thank you. John, is there anything else there that you would add in terms of, what you see, how leaders can, lead by example to influence the individual?
Yeah, I think picking up on what Chloe just said is it's the mirroring, it's the demonstrating the behaviour and being an advocate for good health in the organisation. And sometimes that's a challenge. We all have deadlines and we all have budgets. But certainly, picking up earlier, Jesse said about, some of those warning signs about irritability, the leaders being able to check in with individuals when they recognise their team and recognise someone is struggling through the physical sort of signs or the interactions, I think is really powerful. I think that builds good culture. On an individual basis, there's no doubt the most successful health promotion programs I've seen is where there's an internal champion, and the more senior, the better. Yes. And often that will be someone who maybe has had their own personal physical, psychological challenges that they've overcome and are very powerful in providing that information to the organisation and to their direct reports. And that seems to really resonate. You can have all the policies around wellbeing that you like, but unless there's top-down support and sort of stakeholder engagement with those, it won't work. I learned that in a very painful way many years ago, working in London with the London Underground and running a health program for them. lots of PR, lots of press, got everyone, great program organised. We just forgot to engage the unions, and so no one turned up.
Yeah.
And so recognising who the key people were,
Yes.
not only from a leadership, but some of those team leaders and union reps and whoever it is, to get engagement from them is really important to make sure that a program helps and supports an individual.
Thank you. What we're going to do now is this final a pivot, just in terms of bringing now this information to look and to focus on the impact of strong leadership actually on teams. So, Chloe, I'm going to come back to you to kick this one off. And when we take this concept of strong leadership a step further, from your perspective, like, how can leaders create the clarity that you've spoken about, the connection and the accountability to help teams actually perform at their best? Like, how would you sort of summarize it that they could do that?
Thanks so much, Sharon. It's such a great question. I think what we tend to know from the research, surprisingly, is the clarity and accountability and commitment of a team to do great work actually doesn't always tend to rely on the people themselves, but more how they work together. And I think what a leader can do to help influence that, I spoke before about the role they had in role modeling those underlying assumptions within a culture. But if you may remember, I mentioned there's a couple of other layers there as well. It's not only the behavior, but also the artifacts that we create to say this is our culture and the values that we ascribe to it. And I think what a leader can do is not only focus on the behaviors, but also on setting the direction for those behaviors in a way that is consistent, coherent, and committed to by all staff. How they might look to do that, I think what they would need to understand first in consultation with their teams is, what are we here to do? So what is our overarching purpose as a team and the value that we're trying to create? Think of this as our North Star. And then once we've been able to agree that North Star, naturally the next question would be, what might our values look like to help us best enact that purpose? And we can play around with different values from, say, a teamwork perspective, but also the work that we do to understand what are the, say, 3 to 5 core values that best represent that purpose. And then what we can do once we have our purpose and our core values is actually get to the ways of working and the behaviors from that top-down perspective to say, if these are our values and this is the purpose that we're driving towards, what might we expect in terms of day-to-day behavior from each other to best live out that purpose and those values? And I generally recommend we think about what we will do, but also what we won't do. What are those limits? What are the things that we say are not like us to be able to get to this place where we all agree we want to be? And I think this exercise is really important because it allows us to create a shared language within the team around who we are and what we're here to do. And that helps us to build that clarity, accountability, and commitment to the team culture we want to see.
Yeah, thank you. Jesse, we've sort of touched on, or both you all have really touched on that, the concept of safety and psychological safety. And it's really, I think, often described as a very essential ingredient or part of high-performing teams. How would you say that leaders could foster this within their teams, particularly during, say, challenging times or having a challenging conversation,
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you're absolutely right. Psychological safety is an incredibly important part of a well-functioning team and ultimately a well-functioning organization as well. And although it's become a bit of a buzzword, I guess, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's always been relevant. And whether we called it something else 50 years ago or 100 years ago, it's always been something that's been important for a team to be able to function well. It's just now that it's obviously being legislated for a little bit more and recognized a little bit more as well as an important function within an organization. So when we're talking about psychological safety within a team, we're talking about the environment where people feel like it's safe for them to speak up, to ask for help, to admit mistakes or raise concerns without the fear of an unreasonable ramification happening. And if you think about that, that's really building trust within your team, that they're going to be treated respectfully and they're going to be safe. in that environment. And what we know about trust is that it's not something that we can build overnight, and it's not something that we can do just build by sort of faking it till we make it, of just sort of, oh yeah, I'll do these 3 things that it says, in my leadership book, and I'll get the trust of my individual, or my team rather. It's about how we consistently show our responses over time. So we build trust through our consistency. And if we go back to some of the information that both John, Chloe, and myself were talking about in the individual, it's what are my responses? What am I bringing into this workplace as a leader, where I'm consistently demonstrating that it is okay for people to raise concerns, to make mistakes, because we all know that they're going to make them, and that when they do, those things are brought up, that there's a clear, obviously, range of responses. It's not always going to be the same. There's a number of different things, but the range is going to keep those people safe, and it's going to mean that they're able to get something back from that. That means they're feeling like it's worth it for them to bring it up, and that there's going to be that safety and response back from you as the leader.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And just a quickly with that is, if we look at our own mistakes as a leader too, and we model when we make mistakes, how we respond to them, it can be a really big one for us, as how we expect others to respond, but also how we bring every voice into the conversation as well. So we know that there's certain members of our team, especially if we have a bigger team, who are maybe louder, going to talk more in meetings, going to bring things to you spontaneously. But we also know there might be other people in our teams who are more quiet. They transmit or bring information or ideas in different ways. And if we can find as a leader a way to incorporate all of those aspects into that conversation, and how we can build everyone in to feel like they've got the safety of that communication, we can actually get a lot more out of our team and make every member feel a lot more included and a lot more safe as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's a lot of information there, obviously, that we've talked through, and I hope sort of a few light bulb moments perhaps for people to think about maybe things in a little bit of a different way. I'm actually going to ask you each just sort of one final question before we move into Q&A. So my question is, if there was one leadership behaviour that has the greatest impact on team performance and wellbeing, what would it be and why? John, I'm going to throw to you first.
I would say put on your own oxygen mask first.
Mm-hmm.
Look after your own health, prioritize your own health, and that'll then influence professionally and personally.
And flow out. Yeah, love it. Chloe?
I think I would say, like, focus on your intention. I know there's always different ways of achieving different outcomes for the team, but it all does come back to that kind of non-negotiable of what's our positive intention to create here. So I think just keeping that front of mind.
Okay. And Jessie?
So I think incorporating all of that is really knowing yourself as a leader, and it comes back to that intention that Chloe was saying, but also, what are we subconsciously bringing into the workplace as well? How do I know myself, and how am I able to recognize how the effect I'm having on my team and how I'm leading my team as well?
Okay. So I am going to come back to the three of you in a moment because we've got some questions that have come through for the panel. Before I do that, I just want to speak to a few of the services and solutions that we have at Altius that can certainly really address some of these key issues and concepts that people, that the panel has brought up, and particularly in terms of, building the capability and the capacity really of the leaders within your organisation. So just to touch on a couple of them, we have a range of comprehensive health assessments through our executive health assessments component of the business. It's very much a hands-on medicine approach where we're identifying risk factors, supporting execs and leaders in their proactive health. And very much those assessments are a combination of both doctor and exercise physiologist. And that really forms the basis of really being able to support executive leadership at an executive leadership level. We also have services such as health concierge. So this is where it allows participants, leaders, execs to access a range of services through a multidisciplinary team and a health coach approach. And that's where we're able to build with you a very tailored plan to support health and wellbeing as well. Chloe has touched on the importance of building team trust. So there is a service that we're able to support organisations with known as a team alignment, and that is where we bring your teams together, look at the values, look at the behaviours, and get a shared understanding around what are we agreeing on as a team as to the way that we do work around here. Also, psychometric assessment. So that is where we're using a very validated approach to assess the cognitive abilities, the personality, the values, the leadership style of individuals. That can be used at a pre-employment level. It can be used to support people that are moving into new roles or moving into roles with different leadership demands. And then finally, our Manager Assist or MAP, it's known as, and that is offered as part of our EAP offering as well. And our Manager Assist stream gives you access to both organisational consultants, so to people like Chloe, or to people like Jessie as well, to support leaders either with their own needs as leaders, so working on their own mental health and well-being, or also with strategies within members of their team or their organisation as well. So over to now our Q&A. So I've had a couple of questions come through the panel. I'm just going to change my screen for a minute so I can access those. So question that has come through, what are some ideas and suggestions to reshape the culture of health and wellbeing and psychological safety? Where can we start? Chloe, I might ask you to respond to that one.
Absolutely. So I think in terms of where we can start with this, I would actually say that team alignment exercise to really set the direction for where we want to go in terms of that wellbeing culture and psychological safety can be really helpful because it helps us to understand that based on the outcome of wanting to create a healthy and safe workplace, what might be the different types of behaviors that we would expect to see and what we wouldn't expect to see to help enact that. It's almost a great way to level set a strategy for how we want to move forward to help bring that culture to life. So I think it's very important to start with that good structured kind of team alignment approach to best get to that place.
Yeah, I think it's such a valuable intervention that can really help course correct how a team is actually really functioning and as you said, like create that psychological safety sort of basis and framework. Another question here, John, I'm going to ask you on this one. Would you attribute addiction, so things such as alcohol and smoking, as a common personality trait of leaders, or would you suggest that it's a symptom of the stress that they may be under? And I'll probably ask you to speak to it first and then to yourself, Jessie, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And the answer, which is not always satisfactory, is it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly from a smoking point of view, we see very few people smoking in a leadership and executive role now. It's probably one of the great success stories in public health in Australia. Starting to see more vaping, but certainly from a tobacco smoking point of view, those numbers are down, and that's policy and social acceptance and price. Alcohol, definitely. I think during COVID, what we saw was that binge drinking actually went down, pubs not being open, I guess, but habitual alcohol went up. So people were getting to the end of the day after homeschooling and trying to work and all those sorts of things, and alcohol consumption actually went up. So it can be environmentally based as well. And certainly, as a general rule, I think alcohol levels are coming down in the executive population or the leadership population. It's not as acceptable now to have liquid lunches in most industries like it used to be, for example. And also I think people are more aware of the impact on their performance and what have you. But the reality is stress, a lot of us at times of stress, and COVID proved it, reach for the gin and tonic at the end of the day. Otherwise they wouldn't.
Jessie, would you add anything there?
Yeah, look, I think, I echo John that it is a great question and it is always, from a psychological perspective, a mixed bag. But I think we're looking at that alcohol, especially as a coping mechanism. So especially when we look at stress, when we look at other factors of pressure that can impact us, whether we're in a leadership role or anywhere else, we're looking at, well, what are my mechanisms then that I have a fallback to use to cope? And so something like alcohol can very easily become a coping mechanism because in its acute phase, having a drink, it is a very effective way to cope with stress. But we know that over time, it can have a big impact on our health, both our mental and our physical health. But also from a psychological perspective, it's not leaving room for other mechanisms for us to cope as well. So us looking at, well, let's take that a step back and look at what are our healthy and more effective ways of coping. And if we go back to John at the very beginning, putting those coping mechanisms into the diary that would actually help that person to regulate more effectively and hopefully come home at the end of the day not needing to reach for the vape or the alcohol as much. Obviously, I'm speaking very broadly here, and every individual is different, and it's not just go for a run and you'll avoid that because but it's what are those individual and specific coping mechanisms that help us, and how can we make them more adaptive and healthy for us as well.
And I think another thing that I often see, and sort of linking back to one of the first points we talked around, the importance of sleep that John mentioned, is that relationship between alcohol and even if alcohol consumption is not excessively high, but it's consistent, it can have an impact on sleep quality, and then people sort of then lose that nearly awareness of what good sleep even feels like and what it feels like to wake up feeling refreshed.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got time for one more question. Any recommendations to staff who have leaders that are not skilled or motivated to build a psychologically safe culture? It's a big question. Chloe, not sure if you would have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at first, I would just acknowledge it's a really tricky situation. I think obviously our ability to control other people is very limited. So I think it does come down to what are the different ways that we can make it known what we need. So if a leader is maybe not forthcoming in the types of support that we feel we need, there is a role for us to also be really clear with our leaders on what we need from them and why. And I think if we are still in a place where that support feels limited from that direct reporting line, potentially another recommendation could be looking elsewhere in the organization, maybe for a informal mentor in another area from someone who maybe does just have a little bit more of a leadership style aligned with your needs.
Okay, thank you. Well, look, obviously this is a topic that I'm sure all of us here could literally talk about for many, many hours, but we are well aware that we are talking to or have online a bunch of very probably busy leaders in their own right. So I just, in terms of sort of wrapping up, you will see that there has popped up a little panel. We're just interested to get your feedback about the structure of a session like that in terms of assisting us with future sessions. So we'd really appreciate your feedback on that. I wanted to flag that our next session, our next webinar or in this series will be on the 11th of November. It's Leadership in the Digital Age, Navigating AI, Change and Always on Work. And also just a reminder, as Nicole spoke about at the beginning, if you would like to continue this conversation, you can certainly reach out to us through the QR code. We can link you in with one of our experts just to have an initial brainstorm about some of the ways that we may be able to support and work with you. And I guess just look in finally in terms of just, wrapping up and sort of a key, to summarize, I guess, our sort of key thinking around this session and what led us to really want to explore this in a bit more detail is to leave you with a few final thoughts, and that great teams are built by leaders with the health, capacity and capability to thrive. By investing in leadership, wellbeing and capability, organisations really do create the conditions for better decision-making, stronger team performance, and a culture where people genuinely can thrive. And leadership is not only an individual responsibility, but I think, as John mentioned right at the beginning of the session, it's a strategic business imperative. So thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.